In English, we like to talk about the emphasis being on the wrong syllable. Joking, of course, but every language shows emphasis, emphasizes different words or ideas in different ways, right? How does the Hebrew Bible, how does the Hebrew language show emphasis, and how might you be missing it in your English translation? Stick around, we will talk about it. Hello and welcome to Kairos Classroom. I am Ryan Martin, Kairos Classroom's Greek guy, and I am here with our resident Hebrew enthusiast, Courtney Trotter. How are you doing, Courtney?
I'm doing really great today. How are you?
I'm good. No matter your background, if you're someone who wants to dig deeper into the Bible, has questions about Greek or Hebrew grammar, ancient Near Eastern culture, study tools, and resources, feel free to join us as we discover the world of the Bible through the original languages. Today we are going to be talking about emphasis, highlighting a particular word or a particular idea, and particularly how that works in Hebrew. And we're mostly going to be looking at pronouns, at personal pronouns and its relationship to emphasis. Courtney, what is a personal pronoun?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a weird thought for us English speakers because we use personal pronouns like I or we, and we need them for our verbs. So first we're going to look and see why we need them in English. So we look at our personal pronouns here. We have I wrote, you wrote, he, she, or it wrote, we wrote, you plural, or y'all, as I would like to say, wrote.
Oh, yeah.
And they wrote. And as you can tell, in English, if I just had the verb wrote, I could not tell who actually did the action of that verb. So I need my personal pronoun to know who is doing the action. Now, when it comes to Hebrew, we don't need our personal pronouns in that same way because Hebrew verbs contain that personal pronoun within the verb itself. So that whole one word has both the personal pronoun and the verb. So I know who's doing the action of the verb, even though I don't have a personal pronoun. So you can see over there on the left, I have I wrote, where my subject is separate from my verb. I have two words that indicate that, or he spoke. Again, two words that indicate that in English. But if I look over on the right, in my Hebrew, even if I can't read Hebrew, I can see there's only one word, no spaces. So the first one is katavti. My subject and verb are contained within there. That means I wrote. Or I have amar. And that's my subject and verb. It's contained within there. And so that's he spoke.
You've probably heard the language of conjugation before. It's probably not, if you did Latin in middle school, it probably is not a word that gives you happy feelings. But this is when we change the spelling of a verb based on who's doing the thing, right? Our verbs are conjugated a little bit in English, right? We say I write, you write, he writes, with an S on the end. But that's not enough for us to know who's doing the writing without having to say I or you. In Hebrew, as well as in Greek, the verbs are highly conjugated. They're conjugated enough to where we can tell who's doing the thing without the pronoun there explicitly. So we don't need it. Right? That's really helpful. So like, why do we have them? Why do we have these pronouns if we don't need them?
Yeah, so every time we introduce the personal pronoun chapter as we're teaching our students, we introduce them and I'm like, but you almost never see them. And they're like, well, why do we even learn them? Number one, it's because our pronouns tend to show up in lots of different ways. But the main reason is because when you do see them, they will tend to go before your verb and they are adding emphasis to your verb. So kind of a general rule as you go to Hebrew is that if you see it repeated twice, we're adding emphasis. If you see it repeated 3 times, we're adding a whole ton of emphasis. And sometimes you can see the same word in a verb or noun pop up a whole bunch in one passage, and then you're like, wow, he really wants us to know about the knowledge of God or something like that. So whenever it comes twice, we are adding emphasis. So let's see, how can we add emphasis in English? Because we may not normally do that when we speak English. So you see here on the left-hand side in English, if I wanted to say I myself wrote, like I myself did the writing, I didn't have a ghostwriter. I didn't dictate it to somebody who then wrote it for me. I wrote it all by myself. In Hebrew, I can emphasize that by adding the pronoun ani before that verb. So I say ani katavti, and so that's I myself wrote. Or I could add the pronoun who in front of Amar. So that's he himself spoke. So that's how we would indicate this emphasis is using like myself or himself, yourselves, by adding that reflexive pronoun in English.
Makes sense. Often, as a translator, you're stuck with this problem of understanding what's happening in the Hebrew, understanding what's happening in the Greek, and thinking, how do I communicate this in English, which has different mechanics and different ways of emphasis? Well, this myself, himself, that kind of language is a way of doing that. Of how do we represent what is meant by just the inclusion of this pronoun, just saying I explicitly, because we have to say I in English. So that doesn't show any emphasis. This word myself or himself can do that. So I think you have a couple of texts that you want to take us through that show this, that maybe even many English translations don't even try to show that emphasis. And you think there's some theological intrigue or significance there.
Yeah, a lot of times, like I said, we can use that himself or myself, those reflexive pronouns to indicate emphasis. But I think the reason why they get left out of translations is because we still don't even use them that emphatically in English, you know? And so because they don't really totally communicate the theological point, it's just easier to leave them out. And so our first example, though, that we're going to look at is Exodus 19:6. This is a really foundational text in your Hebrew Old Testament, as the people have come through the Red Sea and are now at the base of Mount Sinai, and God is telling them why they're there. And he says, you are the most treasured possession to me, and you will become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation and be a blessing to all the other nations on the earth. So you are going to be a kingdom of priests. And as you can see here in like the ESV and many other translations, there's no emphatic, like you yourselves will be. There's no emphasis there. But if you were to look at it in Hebrew, you see that pronoun in yellow. There's the you, and then in red, there's the verb, you will be. So it's you will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So he's adding emphasis. So it's kind of cool whenever you're able to see it for yourselves.
Absolutely. And it's not that English translators are trying to trick you. It's not that they're trying to hide something from you. And a lot of times in putting something like you yourselves might even mislead or be open to another translation. Sometimes it's not clearly emphatic as much as it's just being highlighted. But in any case, you see it in Hebrew, you see it there, you see that it's marked. You see that there's a word you there that doesn't need to be there, and that means something. And in this case, it's significant that Yahweh is saying to his people that you will be, not somebody else, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
Yeah, you yourselves, like, hey, the people who are here at Sinai, like, all of you have a very particular role that you're going to serve in, like, my grand overarching story of redemption, right? So it's kind of exciting whenever you see that. Hebrews 10 is so exciting because, as it's talking about there, and kind of all of Hebrews 8 and 10, is that high priest could only go into the Lord's presence once a year. But now because Jesus Christ, our great high priest, has gone in on our behalf, now we can boldly enter God's presence in the heavenly places before that throne and be priests for other people. So like teaching them how to enter the heavenly realms as well. So it's kind of exciting whenever you think about like, yeah, we're priests. And this is like what Protestants love to talk about, the priesthood of all believers.
Yes.
It's its root right there in Exodus chapter 19, verse 6.
And makes more sense and it's more emphatic reading, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be kind of for shock value or just precision, right? That you, right here, at the bottom of this mountain, you are a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Yep. That's great. Have another text for us?
Yeah, I've got one more. This is from Leviticus 17:11. And so I'll go ahead and just read the whole verse for you at the top. But it's in Leviticus 17:11, it says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I myself have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your lives, for it is the blood by means of the life that makes atonement." You can see there in the ESV, there is no I myself. It's just I have given this sacrifice on the altar for you. But again, if you look down here, I've got the pronoun highlighted in yellow, and I've got the verb I have given highlighted in red. So you can see I have I have given. Like, seems very redundant. But if we were to back out and look at it, we see here this larger overarching emphasis of what God is trying to teach us there in Leviticus. We started with Nadab and Abihu offering their own type of strange fire, their own type of sacrifice before the Lord. And then we also see at the beginning of chapter 17, God warning the people not to sacrifice to any other God and not to pour out blood to any other God, but only to him, because he is the only God who has told you why you sacrifice. He is the only God who has actually provided the sacrifice himself. And so, we can't come up with our own offerings. God has made this offering himself. And Jay Sklar has done a lot of work. He's a Old Testament scholar. He's got a great book on the sacrifices. And he says that this is one of the clearest verses in the Old Testament on the theology of sacrifice, because it has that reversal, right? We think that we bring offerings to God, but this is telling us that no, God himself has brought the offering so that we can draw near to him. He's allowed us a way back into his presence.
There's some New Testament implications here, aren't there? This is the gospel. This is the story of God himself providing the sacrifice in himself, Christ. I think of Romans 5, and that while we were sinners, right? While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. God providing the sacrifice. Not something that we can provide. This whole narrative and going through Hebrews of Jesus as the sacrificial lamb. This is God providing, God giving, God doing, not us. And again, very counterintuitive in the ancient world. In terms of the way that sacrifices would often be used to manipulate or kind of start with us as a way of trying to get something. Well, in this paradigm, God provides the sacrifice, and this is highlighted by this emphasis here. The inclusion of this pronoun is pointing in that same direction. That shocking as it is, God himself, I myself have given it for you on the altar.
Right. Exactly. And it reminds me, like, if, I was going to tie in a nice little biblical theology of the Old Testament a little bit, of Genesis 22 with Abraham and Isaac going up to Mount Moriah. And Isaac asks him, hey, Dad, where's the sacrifice? Like, I've got the wood, I've got the fire, but where's the sacrifice? And Abraham is like, the Lord will provide, right? The Lord will provide. And as we know, that just as that moment is about to happen, that there is a ram provided in the thicket. And Abraham sees the angel of the Lord, and God tells him, like, I have provided the sacrifice to you. And that very mountain upon which the tabernacle would come to rest and the temple would be built in Jerusalem is the place that the sacrifices were offered year in and year out until the time of Christ, and who becomes our ultimate and final sacrifice. So it's teaching the people to expect God to provide a better sacrifice that will end all sacrifices.
Amen. That's great. I think, as we said earlier, it's not that your English Bible is trying to hide something from you. It's not that the meaning is, completely different. But you miss the emphasis. And it opens us to get the emphasis on the wrong syllable, as we said. When we see it in Hebrew, we can see kind of where the focus is, where the highlight is, where the shock value is, where the focus has been shifted. There's all these discourse categories that overlap, but something is going on, we can say, and it's something that we might miss if we're just reading it in English. So thanks for taking us through this, Courtney. Is there any other implications or final thoughts of this that you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to let people know that they can do this too, even if they don't have Hebrew. They can, type in verses and, type in the verse into Google and just type in interlinear and go to Bible Hub. It's usually the first option that pops up, and it'll show you each part of speech, and you can click on it and see if your personal pronoun is there. I would say if you wanted to see in any scenario, since they are pretty rare, if you wanted to just see like, hey, is it going to be there? I would normally look around the ones that are talking about God doing something, because a lot of times that's when we're adding emphasis. So if you wanted to see, hey, is there emphasis here when God acts? I would check out those verses.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And even going back to our Leviticus slide here, like you're looking, this is an interlinear above, right? You see the English above there. You see the I by itself, and then you have I and I have given. See both of those there? That's what Courtney's telling you to look for. If you're looking at an interlinear and you see I or he, that's what's going on, and that's something that may or may not be communicated in your in your English translation. So thank you, Courtney, for explaining this and showing us why this helps us to understand the message of the text. So stick with us for more Kairos Conversations. If you have not subscribed to us on YouTube, if you're not liking these videos, always comment and let us know what you think. Let us know maybe there's a text that you know of that does this, that you want us and our other watchers, listeners to know about. Comment. We love hearing from you guys. But that's all for this time, and we will see you next time on Kairos Conversations.